Hello everyone, my name is Zach Deloach. I'm the Safety and Compliance Manager for Pac-Van. Today we'll be discussing confined spaces. The purpose of today's training is to inform all employees about the hazards that confined spaces pose, as well as how to recognize and avoid those hazards. This training applies to all employees in an operational position, those who perform operational functions, or who work near confined spaces. I am responsible for creating this training program and ensuring it stays up to date. Branch and fleet managers are responsible for providing this training to you, as well as providing you with a copy of the Pac-Van Confined Spaces Safety Program. All employees are responsible for viewing this training video, reading the Pac-Van Confined Spaces Safety Program, and adhering to all rules and requirements contained inside. A confined space is any space that meets these three criteria. First, it must not be designed for continuous employee occupancy. Next, the space must be large enough that an employee can enter the space to perform necessary work. Finally, the space must have limited or restricted means of entry or exit. If a space meets all three of these criteria, it is considered a confined space. Some confined spaces can be freely entered for work without following special policies. However, if a confined space meets any of the following criteria, it is considered a permit-required confined space. It then becomes subject to an entirely separate set of rules and regulations. The first criteria is that the confined space has the potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere. This could mean a lack of oxygen or the presence of other dangerous substances that could be toxic, flammable, or combustible. The second criteria is that the contents of a confined space could engulf an employee who enters. Grain silos or sawdust hoppers are the most common type of permit-required confined space that meets this criteria. The third criteria is converging walls or downward sloping floors that could cause entrapment or asphyxiation. An example of this is a confined space with downward sloping floors that lead to a hole where an employee could become stuck. The final criteria is a confined space that contains any other recognized serious safety hazard or health hazard. This can include any type of moving parts, exposed blades, holes, or any other condition that could be dangerous to those in the confined space. Remember, a confined space only has to meet one of these criteria to be considered a permit-required confined space. Employees must know how to work safely when they are in the vicinity of permit-required confined spaces. The first step is to identify these spaces. All permit-required confined spaces should be clearly marked at all entry points. If you see an entry point that is not clearly marked, immediately stop what you're doing and mark the space properly. In addition to signs and warnings, all permit-required confined spaces must be blocked in some manner to prevent the entry of an unauthorized person. This could mean a locking door, a closing hatch, or a marked hole cover as shown on the screen. When working near permit-required confined spaces, employees should have a plan in place for rescue operations if someone were to accidentally enter the permit-required confined space. First and foremost, no unauthorized employee should ever enter a permit-required confined space to attempt to rescue someone else. This will simply add casualties that will have to be rescued. Instead, employees should contact emergency services or the on-site rescue team. The bottom line for Pac-Van employees is that company policy mandates that no employee ever enter a permit-required confined space for any reason. The most common type of permit-required confined space that Pac-Van employees are exposed to is our line of frac tanks. These tanks meet the permit-required confined spaces standard due to their potential to contain hazardous atmospheres. In order to remain compliant, all frac tanks should have the hatches closed or blocked with bars at all times to prevent entry. All entry points must be clearly marked with the label on all entry hatches. Additional permit-required confined spaces signs can be placed elsewhere on the tank as necessary. For additional information on the process and procedures involved, employees can reference the Pac-Van Confined Space Safety Program. Remember the most important thing: Pac-Van employees will never enter a permit-required confined space for any reason at any time. This training video is meant to be a brief overview of Pac-Van's Confined Spaces Safety Program. It does not cover all of the information in the program. After watching this video, ensure that you read the program in its entirety before signing and submitting the training acknowledgement form to your manager. Please direct any questions concerning this safety training program to your supervisor or myself at the email and phone number listed here. Keep up the good work and stay safe.